If I showed you this image, would you recognize it? It's a pen illustration by Rich Johnson. I'm willing to bet many of you do recognize it in connection to the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, but what I'm not so certain about is how many of you have actually read it. After all, the premise seems clear as day written on the front cover. A man wakes up to find he's transformed into a bug. What else could there be? For some people, that is all there is to it. A man named Gregor Samsa wakes up one day and he's a bug, and it's all very sad, and that's that. For other people, it's so much more than a man waking up in a bed as a bug. I'll let you guess which group I'm in. I do know that this novella has been dissected to death. Some people love it, some people hate it. In fact, I found a lot of the one-star reviews on Goodreads to be really funny, and I thought we would just kick off by reading a couple of them. It's giving, if I was a worm, would you still love me? If this happened to me, I would want someone to stomp on me. At least it was short. Someone squish this motherfucking bug. Man turns into bug or something, gets killed by an apple. Boring. 1.5 stars. If I woke up as a large cockroach, I would also starve myself and die. And honestly, I can't even fault these reviews because they're not even wrong. I can absolutely see why someone would think the Metamorphosis is dry and boring if you aren't able to connect the allegory into something meaningful for you. However, when I first went in on this story, blind as I try to be, the connection between disability and Gregor's story smacked me in the face immediately and repeatedly. Some others have also made the argument that it was meant as an allegory for homosexuality, and I can also definitely see that, but the allegory for disability was more prominent and meaningful for me personally. I'll go ahead and preface with the context that I am disabled. I have type 1 diabetes, and I have, you're gonna watch me mess up this pronunciation, spondylolisthesis, which led to a high-grade spondylolisthesis, everyone caught for me, which gives me moderate to severe back pain at times. I have gone through a lot of chiropractic treatment for that, and that has kept me up and stable. And then there's also ADHD. Every disabled person's lived experience is different and valid, so I just want to preface that a lot of what I saw in the Metamorphosis is more easily viewed through the lens of visible and profound disability, but many of the thoughts and feelings of Gregor Samsa can apply to huge swaths of disabled folks. Even though my disabilities could be considered invisible or low visibility, I found a lot of personal connection in the Metamorphosis, and now I'm here, yapping about it for all of y'all who care to listen. Before we get deep in the weeds, I do want to firstly thank you for watching. If you enjoy this, I have other videos going over other stories. Liking and subscribing also helps me immensely. I'm trying to reach 500 subscribers by the end of the year, and I do attempt to put out one high-quality, long-form video a month. Thank you again, and let's get into it. The first line's pretty iconic. Even just this first line gives us a great idea of the story's past and the story's future. One morning, as Gregor Samsa was waking up from anxious dreams, he discovered that in his bed, he had been changed into a monstrous, verminous bug. The man is already dealing with enough stress that he has anxious dreams, and then he had to go and get changed into a bug. Now, just a note for all of you lovely folks, the famous piece by Rich Johnson uses a scarab beetle as the model. Others assume he becomes a cockroach because of some of the later descriptions. Kafka never specifies what kind of bug he is, and in fact was against it ever being portrayed visually. Thankfully for us, Kafka died back in 1924, so he's not around to have a say anymore. Gregor first thinks he's just dreaming. Then, when he realizes he's not dreaming, he tells himself he'll just go back to sleep and he'll feel better once he wakes up again. But he finds this to be wholly impossible as he can't get himself on his right side, which is how he's used to sleeping. He tries to get into position for a long time, tossing himself onto his right side just to roll back onto his back, and only gives up once his body starts to hurt. After all this effort, he then reflects not on the horror of having become a bug, but instead on how hard his job is. He goes on about how he works shit hours, he doesn't have many real friends, and his boss overworks him. The only reason he still tolerates any of it is because his parents apparently have some debt. He estimates another 5 or 6 years to eliminate this debt, and once he does, he's going to tell his boss off once and for all. But in the meantime, he has to get up because he's got work to do, and he has to be on the train by 5. Yes, that's correct. 5 a.m. Gregor is getting up at the ass crack of dawn to be a traveling salesman, which he hates, to take care of his family and their debt, which he loves. The family, not the debt. And listen, I don't have a problem with that. If you want to make that sacrifice, then by all means, do it. But just keep it in mind that Gregor very clearly, very loudly, very specifically hates this work. But he does it because he wants to take care of his family, and that is more important to him. Gregor is a man who wants to make that sacrifice. You'll come to find that Gregor is a man who makes a lot of sacrifices. Gregor then finds that suddenly it's 6:30. His alarm was set for 4 o'clock. He panics all over again because his boss has an errand boy on the payroll just to make sure people are getting on their trains as expected. So they've definitely gone and tattled on Gregor already for not getting on his 5 o'clock train. The thought then occurs to Gregor, what if I call in sick? To you and I, this sounds perfectly logical. There's really not a way to be sicker without being dead in this moment. But Gregor doubts that the doctor the boss employs will see it that way. Get a load of this passage. Well then, what if he reported in sick? But that would be extremely embarrassing and suspicious, because during his 5-year service, Gregor hadn't been sick even once. The boss would certainly come with the doctor from the health insurance company and would reproach his parents for their lazy son and cut short all objections with the insurance doctor's comments. For him, everyone was completely healthy, but really lazy about work. And besides, would the doctor in this case be totally wrong? Apart from a really excessive drowsiness after the long sleep, Gregor in fact felt quite well and even had a really strong appetite. This is absurdism at its finest. Yeah, I feel fine, other than the fact I'm really sleepy, I'm really hungry, and that I'm a big brown bug now instead of a human. Time to run to the train station before the boss chews me out. This contradictory way of thinking of not feeling well, but also trying to say you don't feel that unwell, I would bet good money that every single disabled person has had that same exact experience. I know I have. When I first started having my back problems, I tried to push through it. In fact, I went through the same exact train of thought that Gregor had. I took a few days off from my college classes, took a shit ton of ibuprofen, did a lot of laying down, and occasionally forced myself to power through because other than feeling like my spine was getting choked the same way Homer Simpson chokes Bart, I didn't feel that unwell, right? Anyway, it's 6:45. Gregor wants to hit the 7 o'clock train, but he has to get out of bed to do that. He has a habit of locking his bedroom door from his experience traveling, so when his mom comes to the door, she's not able to actually get in, only speaking to him from outside his room. Gregor wants to explain everything to her, to lay it all out, but he limits himself to just telling her, "Thank you, Mother. I'm getting up right now." His voice sounds kind of weird, which just makes his mom more concerned than before. His father also makes an appearance, showing some honest concern for him, asking multiple times, "Are you all right? Do you need anything?" Even his younger sister joins in, quietly begging him to open the door, and Gregor does the same as before. "Thank you, I'm fine, I will be right out." All the while, he's still in denial, telling himself he'll stand up and all of this bug business will have been a fantasy. Long story short, it is not a fantasy. Gregor Samsa is indeed a big brown bug. He makes a lot of attempts to get out of bed, and he thinks about how much easier it would be if he had someone to help, like his dad and their servant girl, just to flip him over. But he can't make himself say anything. In fact, he even questions himself. Even if the doors were unlocked, should he really call out for help? He's breathing hard, his body hurts, but he's telling himself he has to get up because the office opened at 7 and it's 7:15, so someone's going to come down to bitch at him about missing his train. As he's still struggling to get up, there's a knock at the front door of the apartment, and he knows that his deadline is up. The worst news of all is that it is Gregor's manager himself, not an assistant or an errand boy, and you can tell any hope of getting out of this unscathed leaves his mind. This does, however, frighten him enough to finally get him out of bed. He hits his head in the process, but that's fine because he's finally out of bed and willing to appease the people before him. So now we get to confront Gregor's boss and his firm's ableism, which echoes loudly to current day disability and employment sentiments. The first clue was that the employer's doctor doesn't think anyone actually gets sick and that they're just lazy, echoing today's sentiment of leeches, or the idea that people will pull disability benefits when it's not really needed. The family is urging Gregor to open up because the manager is there, and the father explicitly says, "Mr. Manager has come and is asking why you have not left on the early train. We don't know what we should tell him. Besides, he also wants to speak to you personally. So please, open the door. He will be good enough to forgive the mess in your room." Oh, yes, don't mind the mess in my room. I'm just having a major medical episode. I've turned into a big fucking bug, but don't mind the mess. It's really just a personal flaw of mine. How absolutely terrible. As far as I can tell from the text, his room isn't even messy. But the kicker is what his dad continues to babble on about in an attempt to appease the manager. Anyway, I'm happy that you're here, Mr. Manager. By ourselves, we would never have made Gregor open the door. He's so stubborn, and he's certainly not well, although he denied that this morning. Which, of course, Gregor immediately contradicts by saying, "I'm coming right away," and it takes him a lot of effort to make sure it comes out clear and precise. He's moving slowly because he's just now figuring out how to move, because his entire existence has been changed. But it's not quick enough for anyone on the other side of the door. His dad is getting impatient, keeps knocking, asks if the manager could come in, and Gregor, still struggling to the door, flat out tells him no. His sister begins to cry at this. In all the chaos, it occurs to both us and Gregor that no one who knew about his condition would have seriously demanded that he let the manager in. And yet, he's still trying. The manager begins to shout at him, throwing a whole slew of insults and what we can guess are lies. I honestly think I won't do any better than just reading it verbatim for you, so here it is in all of its disgusting glory. "Mr. Samsa," the manager was now shouting, his voice raised. "What's the matter? You are barricading yourself in your room, answer with only a yes and a no, are making serious and unnecessary troubles for your parents, and neglecting, I mention this only incidentally, your commercial duties in a truly unheard of manner. I'm speaking here in the name of your parents and your employer, and I am requesting you in all seriousness for an immediate and clear explanation." I am amazed. I am amazed. I thought I knew you as a calm, reasonable person, and now you appear suddenly to want to start parading around in weird moods. The chief indicated to me earlier this very day a possible explanation for your neglect. It concerned the collection of cash entrusted to you a short while ago, but in truth, I almost gave him my word of honor that this explanation could not be correct. However, now I see here your unimaginable pig-headedness, and I am totally losing any desire to speak up for you in the slightest. And your position is not at all the most secure. Originally, I intended to mention all this to you privately, but since you are letting me waste my time here uselessly, I don't know why the matter shouldn't come to the attention of your parents. Your productivity has also been very unsatisfactory recently. Of course, it's not the time of year to conduct exceptional business, we recognize that. But a time of year for conducting no business, there is no such thing at all, Mr. Samsa, and such a thing must never be. And who wouldn't be absolutely dismayed at having that directed to them right in front of their whole family while also having woken up as a bug? Gregor makes a lengthy reply, trying desperately to appease the manager and keep his dignity intact. All the while, he is still trying to reach the door. He finally manages to prop himself up using some drawers in his room and moves to open the door because he really wants to open the door. We also see this play into the fantasy that things are not as serious as they seem. He was keen to witness what the others, now asking after him, would say at the sight of him. If they were startled, then Gregor had no more responsibility and could be calm. But if they accepted everything quietly, then he would have no reason to get excited, and if he got a move on, could really be at the station around 8 o'clock. As he continues to inch closer to the goal of unlocking the door, the manager on the other side, well, His flabbers are gasted, to say the least. He thinks Gregor is playing some sick joke because he couldn't understand any part of Gregor's lengthy reply. His mother is really freaking out at this point because none of this is normal, and the manager goes on to say, almost to himself, that it was an animal's voice just now that spoke to them. This is the first instance in a long line of dehumanization that we'll find Gregor subjected to. But the comment doesn't panic Gregor. In fact, he thinks that because people are realizing that something serious is happening to him, that they'll be more likely to get him help. Kafka explicitly writes, he felt himself included once again in the circle of humanity, which I do have the great misfortune of informing you that does not last long. His sister is running for a locksmith and a doctor, but the others are at Gregor's door. He's having this fantasy of his parents cheering him on as he finally manages to grab the key with his mouth and turn it. Triumphant at last, he uses his head to push the lever down and open the door. Side note, thank goodness it was a lever. There's a reason they're ADA specified instead of knobs. Knobs require pinching and twisting, which Gregor absolutely would not have been able to utilize to open his door. But with a lever, he's able to use any part of his body that can reach it, just like you can if you have any significant limb differences or if you happen to have your hands full. Accessibility is beneficial for literally everyone, and if you think differently, you're wrong. As Gregor begins to step into view, he sees his military portrait and reflects briefly on that time in his life. He describes it as a time where he was both free from common worries and worthy of respect simply for the uniform he wore. It's a taste of the life before his time in his sales firm, but it doesn't last long. When the others finally get a look at Gregor, it's absolute havoc. The manager steps away in fear, covering his mouth. Gregor crawls forward but falls into his mom, who completely hides her face. His dad first raises a fist to Gregor, then also covers his face and cries loudly. Gregor alone remains composed, but I would argue far from calm since he begins to babble like his dad did before. "You'll allow me to set out on my way, will you not? You see, Mr. Manager, I am not pig-headed and I'm happy to work. Traveling is exhausting, but I couldn't live without it. Where are you going, Mr. Manager? To the office? Really? Will you report everything truthfully? A person can be incapable of work momentarily, but that is precisely the best time to remember the earlier achievements and to consider that later, after the obstacles have been shoved aside, the person will work all the more keenly and intensely. Mr. Manager, don't leave without speaking a word telling me that you'll at least concede that I'm a little in the right." Mr. Manager does, in fact, leave without speaking a word telling Gregor that he'll at least concede that he's a little in the right. That might be because Gregor is a big bug, and that was probably the last thing the manager was expecting to see, but it might also be because no one can understand his little buggy speech. The manager flees, and Gregor makes an attempt to chase, trying to convince him that it'll be fine, and he'll go about his business right away. Cut to him eating a sandwich on the train like that cockroach in SpongeBob. Before Gregor can actually make it out the front door, his father picks up the manager's discarded cane and a large newspaper and actually shoos Gregor back into his room. This again takes a lot of effort on Gregor's part. He's not had the chance to walk backwards as a bug, and he's afraid that his dad is going to batter him to death. He tries to back up a few times. His dad keeps stomping his feet and waving around the cane and the newspaper. After a long time of being unsuccessful, he decides to go with the next plan. Austin powersing his way around so he can move forward into his room. This seems to appease his dad, who even helps him by pushing him with the tip of the cane into the direction he's headed. However, a new problem rears its head. His body is too wide when he's down on all his legs to get through the doorway again. But what do you do when your other option is getting caned to death by your own father? You force your way through, even if it means getting stuck at an angle. Gregor gets stuck, and it all hurts. Parts of his body are pinned, some have been scraped against the frame, but his father comes up behind him and gives him one huge push, shoving him decisively in the room. He then slams the door loudly in the face of a bloodied and exhausted Gregor. That is the end of part 1 of the Metamorphosis. In it, we see some prevalent moments of internalized ableism. For those of you that may be struggling to understand what internalized ableism is, you may find the way Fiona Kumari Campbell describes it to be helpful. She writes, "From the moment a child is born, he or she emerges into a world where he or she receives messages that to be disabled is to be less than, a world where disability may be tolerated, but in the final instance is inherently negative. We are all, regardless of our status, shaped and formed by the politics of ableism. Instead of embracing disability at the level of beingness, i.e., as an intrinsic part of the person's self, the processes of ableism, like those of racism, induce an internalization or self-loathing which devalues disablement. To attain the benefit of a disabled identity, one must constantly participate in the process of disability disavowal, aspire toward the norm, reach a state of near able-bodiedness, or at the very least, to effect a state of passing." The gist of all this is that the idea of disability itself being bad is ingrained so hard in society that even the people who are disabled see it as a personal flaw to be disabled. In order to fit in more easily with the rest of the community, they will pretend to be fully abled in a way that is almost always detrimental to their own mental or physical health. This sentiment screams its way through this first part, with the denial Gregor faces of his own condition. He pushes himself to exhaustion, faces physical and psychological harm, and ends this first part severely wounded, all as a result of attempting to fulfill the duties able-bodied Gregor was taking. Purely on the matter of employment, Gregor faces immediate discrimination from his manager at just the suggestion of a medical event. And yet, Gregor still pushes to do the work because that's what's expected of him. Part 2 begins with Gregor waking up a long time later, the sun beginning to set. He thinks he got woken up by the sudden closing of his bedroom door, but he can't be certain. Assessing his body, he finds that he's very sore, a long scar running on his side, and one leg being fully lame. By the door, he finds a bowl with milk and white bread, which at first delights him. That used to be Gregor's favorite food, key phrase here being used to. When he goes to dive into it, despite the pain and coordination it required, he realizes that suddenly what used to be a favorite now disgusts him. Defeated yet again, he crawls to the middle of the room, settling on peeking out through the crack in the door to watch his family in the living room. There's a stillness in the apartment, and Gregor remarks to himself how his family leads a quiet life. It's a point of pride for him to be able to provide for them, but there's no way it can continue like this. This revelation terrifies Gregor before he decides to just crawl around the room in an effort to drown out the thought. At one point, someone cracks open one of the doors, then quickly shuts it again. In an attempt to appease the visitor, he positions himself away from the door. But now, the door was not opened anymore, and Gregor waited in vain. Earlier, when the door had been barred, they had all wanted to come into him. Now, when he had opened one door, and when the others had obviously been opened during the day, no one came anymore, and the keys were stuck in the locks on the outside. The dichotomy between a family concerned for Gregor and a family disgusted by Gregor is evident. He wants to think over how to reorganize his life from scratch, but the height of the room makes him nervous. Instead, he crawls under his couch, doing the bug equivalent of tossing and turning all night, finally deciding that for the time being, he would have to keep calm and with patience and the greatest consideration for his family, tolerate the troubles which in his present condition he was now forced to cause them. Gregor feels shame in his new ability. He doesn't want to quote-unquote abandon his family, but the fact is that he literally cannot work since he's an actual giant brown bug. Instead of taking in the fact that Gregor himself has changed and allowing himself to grieve the life he used to live, he concludes that he is a burden to his family and so must be as grateful and loving to them as possible. Thus, we begin to see a dynamic of caregiver and caregivee. When you think of this dynamic outside of the story and in our real-world reality, one of the more common examples could be between an adult child and a parent with dementia. The names are going to be on the screen. I'm probably about to say them wrong. It's Papastavro Evridiki et al. Wrote in their article, Caring for a Relative with Dementia, Family Caregiver Burden. The cost of caring for people with dementia is enormous, both monetary and psychological. Partners, relatives, and friends who take care of patients experience emotional, physical, and financial stress. Their research found more than half of the caregivers studied showed signs of depression. It didn't matter if the patient lived in the community or if they were institutionalized. The burden of caregiving for the patient heavily affected the caregiver, which then creates a domino effect, leading to poor standards of care, neglect, or even abuse of the patient, and indicate the need for patient institutionalization. They did also further go on to note that high-burden caregivers would use emotional coping strategies in an attempt to relieve this burden. The examples they gave were praying and seeking God's help, hoping for a miracle, and daydreaming. This would then domino into the caregivers giving less patient-centered care, which leads to condition decline and eventually death.
Foreshadowing is a literary device that writers utilize as a means to indicate or hint to readers something that is to follow or appear later in the story.
Eventually, Gregor's sister comes back in and sees that the food she left for him has barely been touched. She picks it up with a rag so as not to touch the dish with her bare hands, as if Gregor's got the cooties and they'll spread just from him breathing on and sloshing around the milk a little. Then she brings in a whole assortment of food, trying to see what he likes and what he doesn't like. Then we get this. And out of her delicacy of feeling, since she knew that Gregor would not eat in front of her, she went away very quickly and even turned the key in the lock so that Gregor could now know that he might make himself as comfortable as he wished. Gregor is projecting a kindness on his sister that we can tell she isn't actually giving him, in part demonstrated with the decision to not directly touch the dish that Gregor has touched. It becomes more obvious when, eventually, the sister comes back and hesitates while turning the key in the lock, then sweeping up everything, not just what Gregor had touched. And that's how they continue. His sister opens the door and feeds him in secret, sending away even the servant girl so that she can't get a peek in. It becomes very apparent in the way his sister speaks while she's in the room that she and everyone else assume he can't understand them, stemming from his inability to communicate in a way that they understand. This is your reminder to ignore the nonverbal elephant in the room. See, nonverbal and minimally verbal individuals with ASD are arguably the most needy phenotype. However, this subgroup has been largely understudied in the research literature. Over almost 60 years of research, our searches through nearly 60 years of research only yielded 29 studies, and only 26 with unique participants that focused exclusively on teaching communication to nonverbal or minimally verbal individuals with ASD. After a bit of time, despite the attempt to keep Gregor's condition a secret, it's evident that the servant girl knows about it. After all, she was there the day he changed. She quite literally gets on her knees and begs to leave the Samsa's service, cries when she gets to leave as if she was receiving the greatest favor which people had shown her there, and without anyone asking it of her, she swore a fearful oath not to reveal anything to anyone, not even the slightest detail. Gregor's mom and sister take up the cooking, but everyone is too rattled to actually do any eating, which honestly is pretty fair. You're allowed to be upset that your family member has turned into a giant bug. The subject of their financials is finally discussed. As mentioned before, Gregor was the only breadwinner in the household. His father had a small business that collapsed, and without a second thought, Gregor jumped in to take care of all of them, working long hours for a firm that he despised because he wanted to make sure his family was taken care of. He'd assumed that nothing was left over from his dad's small business, so he threw himself into his work, and at first his family was overwhelmingly grateful. Those had been beautiful days, and they had never come back afterwards, at least not with the same splendor, in spite of the fact that Gregor later earned so much money that he was in a position to bear the expenses of the entire family, costs which he, in fact, did bear. They had become quite accustomed to it, both the family and Gregor as well. They took the money with thanks, and he happily surrendered it, but a special warmth was no longer present. We then get a glimpse into the secret plan Gregor had had for all of this bug business. Since his younger sister played the violin and loved it, he'd planned to announce at Christmas that he was sending her to the conservatory, despite the cost. In earlier days, the two had discussed it, and the sister regarded it as a beautiful dream whose realization was unimaginable. This man was literally preparing to pay to let his sister follow her dream, which, as an artist myself, just kind of drop-kicked me in the soul. It also depressed Gregor to the point that he would bang his head on the door, quite literally coping with self-harm. However, once he realizes that the rest of the family can hear it, which I will say, they take zero effort to resolve his distress or even address it, he stops, not wanting to disturb them. Well, as it turns out, there was a little bit left over from his father's small business, a small amount of savings that earned a little interest. Then there was the money that Gregor brought in. He gave almost all of it to his family in an attempt to wipe the debt, but as it turns out, his father was squirreling a good bit away. And while I'm not going to go over the nuances of debt versus savings in this instance, I'm definitely not qualified to, I will say that it seems to be a decent chunk of change. They have enough to live on for at least a year, maybe even 2. I don't know about you all, but I definitely don't have that kind of savings built up, and I don't know anyone else who does. Gregor admits that this definitely could have gotten them closer to his personal goal of telling his employer to go fuck himself, but in the moment, it's very fortuitous, keeping the entire family from having an immediate crisis. The family resolves that they must now begin to work. The father, despite being older, is indeed a healthy man, which to me suggests he could have been working this entire time beside Gregor, eliminating that debt even faster. His mother has asthma and struggles with the most basic of household duties, and his sister is only 17, someone whose youth arguably has been protected properly by Gregor's hard work. All of it leaves Gregor ashamed and truly melancholic. The only real respite he gets is staring out the window sometimes. He pushed a chair up against the window, and his sister would even return it to its spot after doing some cleaning in his room. She even begins leaving the window open. It appears to us that she's doing a real kindness to Gregor, and he wishes he could tell her just how grateful he is to her. Alas, he is but a bug. But then we get this bombshell dropped on us. The way she opens the window and leaves it open isn't just like I'll just leave the door open for him now, Humpty Dumpty Dum. It's that she runs to the window without closing the door behind her, then sits and takes a bunch of deep breaths in the open window as if she was almost suffocating. The noise and suddenness of it all frightens Gregor every single time, twice a day, without fail. He trembles under his couch and still tells himself that she'd willingly make the effort to spare his nerves if it had only been possible to remain with the window closed in a room where Gregor lived. It makes me wonder if the room itself is beginning to smell, or if she's just having intense panic every time she comes in. But either way, it leads us to question just how well she can be cleaning the room if that's how it goes every single time. After a month, which Gregor notes, there was now no particular reason anymore for his sister to be startled at Gregor's appearance. She does indeed get startled by his appearance, either startled or just flat out disgusted. She opens his room's door to see him staring out the window, pauses, then slams the door shut once again. He tells himself it probably just looked like he was perched up to bite her, which must have been the reason why he'd scared her. He immediately moves back under the couch in an attempt to appease, and it takes her hours to come back in. He comes to the realization that no matter how much time passes, they're going to find his appearance intolerable. So he resolves to spare her even this sight by dragging a sheet over the couch so that what little was visible from underneath was now hidden. Of course, in order to make this accommodation for his sister, it takes him 4 hours of maneuvering. Despite everything that had happened to him, despite the way he's being treated, despite seeing no pleasure from hiding himself away, despite the way his family looks at him, he is still showing consideration for them. He is still sacrificing his own comfort for them, and in return, he's getting the absolute minimum. His own parents don't show up for weeks, and they dote on his sister for taking on the burden of cleaning up after Gregor. His mom talks about wanting to visit Gregor, but that's a lot different from taking care of Gregor. Gregor also wants to see his mom. After all, it's his mom. He's gone through a lot just in the last month of being a bug. A man is allowed to want his mother. Well, as it turns out, Gregor gets kind of bored in his room, so to entertain himself, he climbs up the walls onto the ceiling where it's easier to breathe for him. He also notices that if he falls from there, it never really injures him like the other times he's taken a hit. His sister also notices because he leaves tracks behind, and Gregor believes that out of the goodness of her heart, she wants to remove all the furniture so that he'd have more room to crawl around and entertain himself. Knowing that his father would be against anyone but his sister going into the room, she waits for a day when he's out and recruits the mother to go in and help her move the furniture out. Out of kindness for his mother, he hides under the couch with the sheet pulled over him, watching from the shadows. He's excited to see his mom again for the first time in several weeks and to also have more room for activities. The two begin moving furniture but don't get very far. As they're about halfway through with the first piece, Gregor's mom stops and points out two very convincing realities to his sister. The first is that there is no way they'll have it done before the dad gets home. The second, more heartbreaking reality is that they can't even tell if Gregor would actually want the furniture moved out. She goes on, "Isn't it a fact that by removing the furniture, we're showing that we're giving up all hope of an improvement and are leaving him to his own resources without any consideration? I think it would be best if we tried to keep the room exactly in the condition it was in before, so that when Gregor returns to us, he finds everything unchanged and can forget the intervening time all the more easily." This is the first time any of them have brought Gregor's feelings into consideration for more than the bare necessities. Sure, his sister is giving him a buffet of scraps for food, but that's because she simply feels obligated to keep him alive. But his mother has this idea that just as suddenly as he changed into a bug, he'll change back, and that once that happens, they'll be able to move forward like it never happened in the first place, which of course is another line of thinking a lot of caregivers and families go down, especially when their status changes by a large degree in a small amount of time. My own grandfather had a sudden onset of disability after a stroke. His ability to speak was entirely taken from him, but he absolutely still understood us. It just stripped his means of communication all the way down, all in one evening. My grandmother continued to have the same mindset that we see for Gregor's mom. She was convinced that through rehab and physical therapy that he would be able to come home and live a normal life again. That mindset continued through my grandpa continuously getting himself up out of bed in the night and immediately falling, injuring himself. It continued through a brain bleed. It continued when they made the decision to pull him off of blood thinners in an effort to stop the bleeding. It even continued when hospital staff called my dad, telling him to come down because it was urgent. According to my dad, she was delighted, thinking he'd begun to speak again. He had not begun speaking again. He had, in fact, died. Now, hearing his mom bring up the idea of getting better makes Gregor realize that he'd given up on the idea himself. There's a tug between the life he used to have and the life he has now. Another wave of unneeded and unnecessary shame washes over him, and he quickly denounces his wish to crawl freely on the walls and the ceiling and retain his humanity, a vice grip on life before the bug. His sister thinks the opposite of his mother. She insists that they move out absolutely everything except for the couch, because if they get rid of that, there's nowhere for him to hide when they come in to do the bare minimum, and wouldn't it just be cruel to make them look at him? She manages to convince their mother, so they keep moving forward with removing the piece they'd started. Gregor considers that maybe his sister was wanting to take all of these things away so that she could continue playing the hero, coming to his aid. And aside from that, his heart is gripped firmly in the need to return to life before disability. He had to tell himself unequivocally that he would not be able to endure all this much longer. They were cleaning out his room, taking away from him everything he cherished. They had already dragged out the chest of drawers in which the fret saw and other tools were kept, and they were now loosening the writing desk which was fixed tight to the floor, the desk on which he, as a business student, a school student, indeed even as an elementary school student, had written out his assignments. Gregor is having his first self-serving moment since this whole fiasco started. He's realizing that he is changed, and the grief for himself is finally hitting. He had an entire life before he woke up in bed as a bug. He was his own person with wants and needs, with dreams and fears. Sure, he was supporting his family at the moment, and he was glad to do it because he loves them, but he wanted to escape and find a different career once his family's debt was cleared. He wanted to see his sister go to the conservatory for violin. He wanted to meet people and have friends. He makes a decision while the ladies are out of the room. There's a picture frame hanging up on his wall depicting a woman in furs. It's something Gregor had cut out of a magazine, just because he thought it was pretty. That is what he wants to keep. So he rushes to the wall and covers it with his whole body. When they come back in, his sister sees him first and attempts to keep him out of their mother's sight. Gregor is determined, though. He says he'll keep on it, even if his sister comes back in alone to chase him down off the wall. None of that matters, because his mom, suspicious when his sister tries to redirect her back out of the room, looks in and sees him hanging on the wall. She lets out an ear-piercing scream at his appearance, then passes out on the top of his couch. Then, the next heartbreak. "Gregor, you!" cried out his sister with a raised fist and an urgent glare. Since his transformation, these were the first words which she had directed right at him. Not once did they even attempt to speak directly to Gregor. All of this time, they assumed Gregor couldn't understand them without even trying to prove themselves wrong, as if it would make them feel better about the whole thing if he couldn't understand them, as if it strips Gregor the person from Gregor the bug, allowing them to despise him without despising what they think is the real him. The cruel truth, though, is that Gregor is the bug. This is the real Gregor. His sister runs out of the room to go grab some spirits in an attempt to revive their mother. Gregor follows behind as if he could do anything to help. But when she turns back around, just his appearance is a jump scare for her. She drops a bottle and it shatters. Glass flies into Gregor's face, cutting him. The liquid it used to hold is splashed onto his body, leaving a path of chemical irritation. She grabs all of the bottles she can carry and rushes past him and back into the bedroom, slamming the door shut on him, leaving him to wallow in his own guilt out in the living room. Eventually, the father comes home and his sister comes out to let him in. He immediately figures something is up, and it's explained that the mother fainted and that Gregor has broken loose. Broken loose. Like an animal at the zoo, which his father immediately accepts, assuming the worst of him. Hearing all of this, Gregor rushes back to the door of his room in an effort to express that Gregor fully intended to return at once to his room, that it was not necessary to drive him back, but that one only needed to open the door and he would disappear immediately. So soon after the small amount of grief for his own being comes to pass, he's right back to trying to appease his family, especially his father. After all, he's the one who threatened to cane Gregor to death that first day. His fond response doesn't go over well. His father flies into a rage, making Gregor question if that's even really his father. It's not just the rage, it's the sudden ability his father has found. He used to lay exhausted in bed or move slowly on their rare walks. Now he's in a work uniform, standing with perfect posture, perfectly groomed, pulling his big, shiny shoe up in the air in a way that had Gregor terrified. He had known, even from the first day of his new life, that, as far as he was concerned, his father considered the only appropriate response to be the greatest force. The two have a bit of a dance, Gregor trying to be conscious of his movements, refusing to climb up the walls or the ceiling so his father doesn't get the wrong idea. After he gets some distance between the two, the father decides to start throwing apples at Gregor. One after another keep hitting him. Gregor is so scared that he freezes, simply taking the brunt of it. Most of them roll off of him, mostly harmless, but one lodges into his back. Finally, his mother emerges from the bedroom, a complete mess after her fainting spell and asthma attack, but nonetheless, she collapses into his father and begs for Gregor's life. That ends the second part. So far, we've seen how the dynamic has grown cold between Gregor and the rest of his family just in the first few weeks post-Metamorphosis. The third part both re-emphasizes that dynamic and brings the story to its end. It takes a full month for Gregor to recover from the damage he sustained at the hands of his father. In fact, the apple that lodged into his back has remained there, no one even attempting to remove it, becoming a permanent scar. Despite this episode, his dad has seemed to remember that Gregor is, in fact, his son, and that it would be kind for him that, in spite of Gregor's present unhappy and hateful appearance, that it's a requirement of family duty to suppress one's aversion and to endure. The sentiment comes too late, though, because Gregor's mobility, as stunted as it once was, is now almost gone as a result of the attack. It takes him a long time just to crawl around his room, and he's lost the ability to get on the walls entirely. There is a silver lining, though. In the evening, they open his bedroom door so he can sit and watch the family talk. What a treat! They don't really talk that much anyway. It's mostly just his dad falling asleep in his armchair, his mom sewing panties, and his sister studying stenography and French so that she might work her way up the corporate ladder of her sales job. When the women drag him off to bed after a lot of harassing, Gregor even gets to hear his dad sarcastically remark, "This is a life. This is the peace and quiet of my old age." They use the excuse that their work leaves them tired to continually strip what little obligation they feel for Gregor. In fact, they're even blaming him for not being able to move out of their apartment. When Gregor was still a human, he'd picked out the apartment because he was the one paying for it anyway, and he wanted nice things for his family. Now they're upset because it's above their means and insist they can't move because they can't imagine any way to get Gregor out, when the reality is that you can stick him literally in a box with holes. Just stick him in a box. Poke some holes. It's not hard. Finding out how to move Gregor is not the real issue. It's that they're frozen by overwhelm of this giant tragedy and aren't able to tell anyone about it. But don't worry, that's not stopping them from blaming Gregor. It's bad enough that he's even starting to notice that their care, frankly, sucks ass. His sister would literally kick whatever she felt like into the room as far as food went, and would then sweep it up without any real look at what was eaten in the evenings. Dirt, garbage, and dust all build up in his room. At one point, he decided to sit right in it in an effort to make her see it. Unfortunately, that was when the truth hit him. She sees it. She simply does not give a single shit, maybe even revels in it. At one point, his mom went in with several buckets of water and scrubbed out the room, which didn't even do anything for him because it left him sick. And as soon as his sister went in to see it, she actually has the gall to go and cry about it to his mom. It's loud enough to wake up his dad in the armchair, and he takes his sister's side, chiding his mom for going into Gregor's room. Meanwhile, they've left the door open for the whole argument. Gregor hissed at all this, angry that no one thought about shutting the door and sparing him the sight of this commotion. Good news for the rest of the family, though. They've hired a cleaning lady, so they can just pass Gregor off to her. Bad news for Gregor, she's mean as shit. She doesn't even clean his room. She just opens it up and yells at him, trying to get him to come out by calling him a dung beetle. At one point, Gregor is annoyed enough that he has the bold idea to turn towards her. And mind you, this is really slow because he can barely move. All it takes is him to turn towards her for her to pick up a fucking chair like she's an old-time lion tamer, threatening to break it over his back. Really, all she does is come in, observe him like she's visiting an old-time freak show, and then leave. He stops eating. The other people in the apartment start piling their junk into his room. This becomes exasperated when the family begins renting one of the rooms to 3 men. The cleaning lady doesn't even set the stuff down nicely. She literally will chuck their junk in there, and wherever it lands is where it stays unless Gregor moves it himself. And of course, because of the renters, the door doesn't get opened in the evening anymore. Not usually. This evening is a special exception. The cleaning lady left the door ajar, just a little mistake. It's enough for Gregor to peer out and see what life is like for his family now with the 3 tenants. He sees his mother and sister serve the 3 thanklessly at their living room table, and then retreat into the kitchen with his father in order to eat their own meal. Gregor watches the 3 lodgers gorging themselves and laments how he's starving. Just not for the things that he gets fed. We aren't even really sure what he's being fed at this point, just that whatever it is, he's not eating it, and nobody seems to notice. Or if they do notice, they don't care. Then something cuts through the gloom. A short time after the tenants finish scarfing down their meal in silence. A violin. It's from the kitchen. For the first time since Gregor's transformation, his sister is playing the violin. But after only a little bit, his father calls from the kitchen, making sure that the tenants are okay with the violin playing, assuring them that it can stop if needed. Instead, they're excited for it, asking to bring the sister out into the living room so she can play for them, and she does. Gregor is entranced by the playing, pushing his head through the door a bit, the urge to appease his family's terror of him long gone now. He's covered in grime, dragging it along with him since his room doesn't get cleaned out, and he doesn't have the energy to try and clean himself off. Can we really blame him for foregoing his family's comfort when his own comfort has been put to the wayside for such a long time? The lodgers are a bit disappointed in the recital, retreating to a window to smoke cigars and murmur amongst themselves. Gregor's father watches them, clearly wishing only to please them, likely because they're a source of income. Even aside from that, the parents are also captured by his sister's violin music, and so is Gregor, continuing his slow crawl towards his sister. Was he an animal that music so captivated him? He asks himself this question, but the following passage and response shows that humanity still lives and beats true in Gregor's soul. For him, it was as if the way to the unknown nourishment he craved was revealing itself. He was determined to press forward right up to his sister, to tug at her dress and to indicate to her in this way that she might still come with her violin to his room, because here, no one valued the recital as he wanted to value it. He did not wish to let her go from his room anymore, at least not so long as he lived. His frightening appearance would for the first time become useful for him. He wanted to be at all the doors of his room simultaneously and snarl back at the attackers. However, his sister should not be compelled, but would remain with him voluntarily. She would sit next to him on the sofa, bend down her ear to him, and then he would confide in her that he firmly intended to send her to the conservatory, and that, if his misfortune had not arrived in the interim, he would have declared all this last Christmas. Had Christmas really already come and gone? And would have brooked no argument. After this explanation, his sister would break out in tears of emotion, and Gregor would lift himself up to her armpit and kiss her throat, which she, from the time she had been going to work, had left exposed without a band or a collar. The creation and enjoyment of art is one of the most human acts that exists. We've been doing it since we started toddling around on Earth, and now Gregor, who has been starved, kept away in a dirty room filled with junk, is delirious with the joy his sister's violin playing brings him, falling into a fantasy, back to his intentions before the bug, back to when he wanted to turn his sister's fleeting dream into a reality. All of this shows that even through the poor treatment he's received, taking care of his family is something he wishes he could still do. It's not even a fantasy of returning to his old form. It's a fantasy of just being accepted. That his sister would sit in his room and play the violin for him. That she could understand that if things had been different, he'd intended on keeping them comfortable. That he wanted to give her the best life that he could provide. That even if he couldn't physically provide for his family, that he could provide emotional support, just to let them know that he's still in there and he still loves them, despite everything they've put him through. The fantasy is shattered when one of the tenants screams out at the father, pointing at Gregor, who is still crawling his way to his sister. The violin music stops. His father, instead of trying to hurt Gregor for once, tries to pacify the lodgers, who aren't even angry, staring at Gregor the way the cleaning lady stares at him, seemingly finding him more amusing than the violin. The father makes a desperate attempt to shove them into their own room and block the view of Gregor, but they resist, becoming irritated, asking questions about him. At this point, they became really somewhat irritated, although one no longer knew whether that was because of the father's behavior or because of the knowledge they had just acquired that they had, without being aware of it, a neighbor like Gregor. And my, what an awful fate that must be, to have Gregor as a neighbor, the one that they didn't even know existed until a minute ago. I've had awful neighbors. I've had some that play music loud enough to vibrate my walls. I've had some that stomp around late in the night. I've had some that rhythmically open and slam closed their sliding patio door for 2 hours straight in the middle of the night. So let me tell you, while I'd be a little put off by having a giant brown bug as a neighbor, I've had worse. I've had much, much worse than a guy stuck in a bug's body wasting away without so much as a peep. Finally snapping out of the shock of the end of the recital, his sister squeezes in front of the lodgers, who had begun willingly making their way to their room, and makes their bed for them, like room service. These three, who treated the family so poorly in their own home, even after such a breaking point, get their bed made, willingly, without asking. The three finally make their way to their room, declare that because of the suddenly abhorrent condition the apartment and the family are in, they will be moving out. Not only that, they spit on the floor in disgust, proclaiming that they will not be paying the family a single penny for their time living there, and that the family would be lucky if the three didn't take them to court. With finality, they slam the door in the father's face, and he walks away to the living room again, collapsing into his chair. Gregor is in the same spot. Even if he wanted to move, he couldn't, his body being so weak from starvation, and his mind being weak with his plan crumbling in front of him. He fully expected the whole family to begin attacking him again. And honestly, I would too. That's been the pattern. Gregor does something they don't like, and they lash out, physically battering him. This time it's different. This time it's so much worse. The sister begins by banging on the table, then saying, "My dear parents, things cannot go on any longer in this way. Maybe if you don't understand that, well, I do. I will not utter my brother's name in front of this monster, and thus I say only that we must try to get rid of it. We have tried what is humanly possible to take care of it. No, you haven't. And to be patient. No, you weren't. I believe that no one can criticize us in the slightest. Yes, they can. I'm doing it right now." His father agrees. His mother is having an asthma attack. His sister continues, "We must try to get rid of it. It is killing you both. I see it coming. When people have to work as hard as we all do, they cannot also tolerate this endless torment at home." This, to me, is like the ultimate slap in the face. How long did Gregor work hard for them? He worked as hard as they do now, and it was out of the wish to provide for his family, not even out of necessity. He could have chosen not to take on his father's debt. He could have told his old boss to stuff it when he treated him poorly. He could have kept all that money for himself, found a nice house or apartment, built a life on his own terms. But he didn't. For them. And how little have they done for him now in his time of utter need? Now that he's physically unable to care, not only for them, but for himself, they've let him waste away into practically nothing. And now, they have the audacity to call ignoring their ailing family member torment. It makes me absolutely furious. They don't even have the courtesy of taking care of him in a transactional way for all that he'd done for them, much less because they love him like you're supposed to love a brother or a son. The last kicker? These words from the dad. "If he understood us." There's a slight pause. Gregor's sister crying and waving her hand as if there's no reason to even consider the point he's going to make. If he understood us, then perhaps some compromise would be possible with him. If he understood them. If Gregor, standing motionless in the living room, watching them have this discussion, understanding every single word, could possibly understand them, then this would have been so much easier for them. Be so fucking for real right now. Even now, they place their burdens on Gregor. It's all been Gregor's fault. All been Gregor's responsibility to them. Because why be accountable for your son's well-being when you can just pretend you're a saint for the actual bare minimum? Am I so out of touch? No, it's my son turned bug who's wrong. Gregor's sister then goes on. It has to go. That is the only way, Father. You must try to get rid of the idea that this is Gregor. The fact that we have believed this for so long, that is truly our real misfortune. But how can it be Gregor? If it were Gregor, he would have long ago realized that a communal life among human beings is not possible with such a creature and would have gone away voluntarily. Gregor begins the laborious process of turning himself around to go back to his room, and the family is excited about it. The sister most of all, screaming and pointing and hiding behind their father, who throws his arms out like he's some hero protecting her. It's not a pretty sight watching Gregor go. Since that last incident where he was injured by his father, he has to use his head to turn, pulling it up and thumping it down repeatedly to get his body turned. I guess this finally breaks the family out of their stupor. No longer fearful, just staring with pity, watching him stop several times to rest as the process wins him. They say nothing the entire time it takes him to crawl back to his room. At the doorway, he takes one last look into the living room. His sister is the only one left standing, staring. His mother has fallen asleep in her chair, worn from her earlier asthma attack. The moment he makes it past the frame and into his room, his sister leaps forward, slamming the door shut, locking and barring it behind him. It startles him enough that his little legs give out under him, stuck in that one position, just to hear his sister cry out, "Finally!" as she makes the final twist in the lock and steps away. Gregor is left in his dark room, finding that he actually can't move at all anymore. He reflects, finding that despite the intense pain through his entire body, he feels relatively content. Even in this moment, all he can think is of the love he feels for his family, and comes to the same conclusion that his sister did. He must disappear. Then we get this. He remained in this state of empty and peaceful reflection until the tower clock struck 3 in the morning. In front of the window, he witnessed the beginning of the outside growing generally lighter. Then, without willing it, his head sank all the way down, and from his nostrils, his last breath flowed weakly out. The next morning, he's found by the cleaning lady. She doesn't even think anything of his state until she starts harassing him with her broom, trying to tickle him. Of course, he doesn't respond to this, which pisses her off, so she pokes harder at him, which also elicits no reaction. Finally, she shoves him entirely out of the spot he lays in, and when there's no resistance or reaction, the truth becomes apparent. Her first reaction? A low whistle to herself. Her next reaction? Pulling his bedroom door open to shout out to the rest of the apartment, "Come and look! It's kicked the bucket! It's lying there! It's completely snuffed it!" The Samses gather, watches the cleaning lady further proves the loss of life by poking Gregor's body. His mother almost makes her stop, but decides against it. His father gives thanks to God, crossing himself. His sister stares at his corpse and says, "Just look how thin he was. He's eaten nothing for such a long time. The meals which came in here came out again exactly the same." I don't even know how to put all of my emotions into words for this. She knew. She saw. She at least saw the meals. But now she looks at the flat, dry body of the bug, and it occurs to her that there was a problem. Not only this, she's referring to him now as him versus the slinging of it and creature and animal and, of all things, monster. All just last night. She was his last human interaction, slamming the door on him and loudly expressing relief to be rid of him for the moment. And now, the three of them get to feel sorry for the state he was in. The Samses, now officially 3, pile into the parents' bedroom for a brief moment, shutting the door behind them. The lodgers come out of their room and immediately ask where breakfast is, but the cleaning lady hushes them and takes them to Gregor's room so that they might also witness his dried up body. Eventually, the Samses emerge from the bedroom, clearly having been in there crying. In the only moment I can truly respect Gregor's father, he immediately demands the 3 tenants to leave. They try to object, but he stands his ground firmly. Both women clutch to his arms, demanding they leave right now. And after a little hesitation, they do. The Samses stand and watch them descend the stairwell. And once they're gone, they go back into their apartment. Together, they make the decision to all take the day off, telling themselves they had earned this break from work. The 3 of them sit at the living room table, and each drafts their own letter of apology, each to their own boss. Eventually, the cleaning lady announces she's done all her morning work and is heading off, but she hesitates, clearly having more to say. When Gregor's dad finally addresses her, she smiles, almost giddy, letting them know not to worry about the junk from the next room. Note, not Gregor's room, not the bug's room or his room, not even the bedroom, but the next room, because she's already handled it all. It then becomes apparent that she wants to go over every little detail, finding complete joy in the work, but the father stops her. Annoyed that she wasn't allowed to divulge the full process, she huffs and leaves. The father says aloud that he'll be firing her this evening, but the mother and sister have nothing to say about it. The 3 finish their letters, then go out together, riding the tram to the outskirts of the city, discussing their futures. They finally realize that things aren't all that bad. They're all 3 employed, and they feel like now they're able to move into a smaller apartment, which will suit their needs and budget better. The parents look to their daughter, then to each other, passing the silent thought between them that it's time to get her married. When the tram stops, they watch as their daughter stands up first, and they take it as a positive sign, watching her stretch her young body. This last part, the very last bit about the parents watching over their daughter and noticing her young body and putting their faith in her, reads to me like the cycle is beginning again. Did they have that same moment 6 years ago when the father's business failed and Gregor stepped in, young, fresh from the military, devoted to his family's happiness? Maybe. I don't think they mean to run their children into the ground, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, an all too common sentiment for those of us living with disabilities. Anyway, that's the video. All of my sources will be linked in the description. Happy Disability Pride Month. I hope to God I'm actually getting this out in July. I know I'm cutting it, oh God, so short. Take the time, even if it's not still July, take the time to challenge your own beliefs around disability. Honor the achievements and history of the disabled community, and maybe take a look at the changes happening around us and how you can do something good. Just last month, the American Justice Department released a memo suggesting that we put aside certain protections for disabled people, potentially moving back towards favoring institutionalization first, instead of attempting service and care within communities. The already sparse services provided to disabled communities around the country are being slashed one by one. Now we have a potential move to bring back some of the worst treatment for disabled people. We're people. We deserve respect. We deserve dignity. We deserve to live in our communities. We deserve reasonable accommodations. We deserve accessibility. It shouldn't have to be a looming threat or reality for you to care. Just because you probably won't wake up from anxious dreams to find you've been changed into a monstrous verminous bug doesn't mean you won't get into a severe accident and lose the use of a limb, or sustain a traumatic brain injury, or contract a disease that will permanently alter your body, or even just grow old. It shouldn't matter only if it happens to you. It should matter because we're people,